I'm Tony Fulton. Despite limited ability as a player, my career as an administrator exploded. In 1969 I was elected as Secretary of the Southern Tasmanian Basketball Association. After a couple of years as a delegate to the state organisation, I was urged to stand for Secretary, replacing George Russell, who had served for 21 years in the position. I went on to serve Basketball Tasmania for 11 years in various roles, including 1 year as President, 8 as Secretary and 2 as Development Officer. I also represented Tasmania as a delegate to the Australian Basketball Federation. Hopefully during this period I played a significant role in bringing together the various basketball organisations in the state. And I was privileged to work with many fine people during that period. With the help of an American playing in Melbourne, Bruce Sellerbach, I brought out a team of American basketball players in Melbourne who came down and toured Tasmania country towns, including Rosebery, Smithton, Wynyard and Branxholme. And some of those towns had not experienced top basketball before. Particularly remember Branxholme, when they brought in trucks and semi-trailers and put them around an old tennis court, adapted for the occasion, and those grandstands were full. It was a very thrilling day. In 1975, my board and I put together a submission to Basketball Australia to stage the Oceania Olympic qualifying series. We were hopeful, but also aware that we had a lot of work to do. We ended up being awarded 2 of those games. It would have been 3, except for the Australian coach at the time. Lindsay Gaze wanted to stage the 3rd game on his court in Melbourne. It was a deciding game, or could have been a deciding game. So he was covering his backs. We won, or we didn't win, Australia won both those games in Tassie, and we played before full crowds. 2 years later, with major help from fellow administrator Tony Andrikonis, ABC producer Rob Hazelwood, and ABC reporter Tim Lane, we put together a presentation to the ABC to stage the ABC Top Shot series. This was accepted and run for several years in the state. It consisted of 8 teams playing a knockout competition over a number of weeks, and it was broadcast live to air. It was successful in winning a national award and did a great lot of work in promoting basketball in Tassie. That year we negotiated the lease of the Lion Basketball Centre as headquarters for Southern Tasmanian basketball and state basketball. It later led to the appointment of a full-time state director and a full-time coaching director. So all this added to the impetus of basketball at that time. In the early 1980s, I think the highlight of my career was the selection of Kathy Foster and Peter Mann to national squads. Kathy went on to a great international career, and I note that both those players are now Bloodlines members. In 1980, I led a delegation to National Basketball League consisting of Gary Carr, Dave Clark and Colin Bulford, and we were endeavouring to gain 2 newly created spots in the league at that time. The NBL decided to award 1 spot to Victorian team Coburg and the other to Tasmania, but they left it to Tasmania to decide which team got in. They laid their meeting in Launceston. Launceston Casino were ultimately given that honour. As is now well known, the Launceston team was successful in winning the flag in its 3rd year. In 1983, Hobart Tassie Devils, who'd served a couple of years in the South Eastern Australian League, were about to make their NBL debut against Launceston City, and at that time they folded weeks before the start of the season. The Northwest team was given the spot, but they were underprepared, undermanned, and this gave Hobart a good win in their first game in the NBL. I was chairman of the Devils for their first few years, and Wayne Monaghan took over for the remainder of the Devils' 14 seasons. The mainstay in support being TBA and STBL executive David Scott. The Devils won 94 of their 351 games over those 14 years and attracted good public support of both Kingston and Derwent Entertainment Centre arenas. Despite being competitive often, and despite some great players in Steve Carfino, Joe Hurst, Peter Mann and Paul Stanley, to name just a few, it was obvious the Devils were undermanned and underfinanced, and were always going to struggle despite the efforts of many volunteers and players who gave freely of their time. Now I'm sure all Tasmanian basketballers and followers are thrilled with the success of the JackJumpers in reviving our NBL participation and their efforts to put basketball on the map in Tasmania. I'm honoured to have been nominated as a Bloodlines member.